Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of Pudge's Ring Reviews. And immediately, let's get right into it. We're going to do episode 4 of Mr. McMahon. Yeah, we decided to open up Pudge's Ring Reviews with the 6-part docuseries by Netflix, Mr. McMahon. And this one is entitled Attitude. So, the cold open starts with clips of Dr. Jerry Graham. And for those that don't know, he was a wrestler in the WWF back in the day, like the 50s, maybe the 60s, I don't know. Anyway, it's long been said that Vince idolized Dr. Jerry Graham, and Vince says it here, that's who he wanted to be. And then they show some clips, and they showed Dr. Jerry Graham doing the strut, and you're like, wow, that is Vince McMahon. He mimicked that strut to a T. And he talked about, Jerry Graham would light his $100 bills, his cigars with $100 bills, and he asked him if he would ever, you want to ride in the car with me in the Cadillac convertible. And Vince McMahon thought that was the greatest thing. Why did I just always call him Mr. McMahon? So now they get into the show, and they're finishing up, just mentioning the screw job and talking about you started to see reaction on the internet. Now the internet was starting to come into play. And so you had people commenting on this, fans and stuff, that should have not known anything about the backstage stuff. But it was all out there now. And then they get into the Bret screwed Bret promo. I have no sympathy for Bret Hart. Bret screwed Bret. And that was pretty much the start of turning WWF from the characters and all that, fantasy land basically, to more of a reality-based product that WCW had been doing. And it also was the start of turning Vince McMahon into a character, which he called Mr. McMahon. And he said he always wanted to be a character. His dad would never let him in the business. But, now he's in. And they're talking about, the ratings are just... WCW is destroying them in the ratings. And Bischoff said, if you would put the rosters side by side, his roster, especially now getting Bret Hart too, his roster, there wasn't even an argument who had the better roster, or at least the bigger names. But the thing was, it was known, WCW had the better mid-card. Their mid-card was fantastic. The main event matches were not. But they had the names, too. So they had names, and then they had the great mid-card or underneath talent to go with that. Wrestling at the time was dominating in the ratings. They showed, the top 10 cable programs. WCW was on there, 3 times. And WWF was in that top 10. WWF was losing to WCW, but they were still in the top 10 of cable ratings. And Vince decided, let's push, the term you're going to hear in this one is push the envelope. Let's push the envelope a little. And he cuts the little promo where he's we feel like the audience is tired of having their intelligence insulted. We're tired of the passe good guys versus bad guys. And, that promo that he does. And, Pritchard said that Attitude was created. The moment it was created was that one time Shawn Michaels came down. Vince wasn't at the show. Shawn came down with the little biker shorts, and he had gauze stuck in his crotch. And that was the night that Attitude was created. And Vince, was mad about it and fined Shawn Michaels. But then Shawn was like, look at, everyone thought it was funny. Everyone in the back thought it was funny. How can you not think that was funny? And they said, a couple weeks later, Vince would see, he'd point out Shawn Michaels in the back. You see that? That's Shawn Michaels. You know what he has? Attitude. And that's how it became. Triple H came on and said, and I tend to agree with Triple H, he said, some people say, when did Attitude start? And they pick a certain moment. He said it didn't really have a certain moment. Bits and pieces here or there were building up and building up. And I agree with that, because I honestly feel it, when Attitude kind of started to, when the ball started rolling, so to speak, was when Pillman came in. And I don't think Pillman gets enough credit for that. I think immediately everyone jumps to Austin or Shawn. And I think Pillman really started with the Attitude stuff. Triple H said that they would go out there and say all this risque stuff and do all these risque things, and Vince would be like, if you ever do that again, we're gonna be thrown off TV. And he said, like 2 or 3 weeks later, it was like, okay, can you guys go out there and do it again? Because it just was starting to really catch on. Then all of a sudden, the glass shatters, and so you know what that means. Time to talk about Stone Cold. So they do a quick little brief thing about, Steve Austin was wrestling. He was in WCW. He ended up getting injured. He got fired. Went to ECW. And they do a brief synopsis of ECW. One guy comes on and says, it's the punk rock indie version of wrestling. And, it's Paul Heyman comes on and talks about No Holds Barred. It was everything that WWF wasn't, and he knew that WWF looked at ECW as a feeder system for the WWF, and he knew he wasn't going to have Stone Cold or Steve Austin for long. And Steve Austin only wrestled 2 shows there, so but he definitely started doing more of the Stone Cold-esque character there. But then Austin's, it's funny because then Austin goes in and says, I just became Stone Cold Steve Austin and went to WWF. Doesn't mention that he went there as the ringmaster and did that gimmick with Ted DiBiase for, almost a year or whatever. And it wasn't until Ted DiBiase finally left and went to WCW that Stone Cold went off and started doing the Stone Cold character. And it wasn't the Stone Cold character that it became. He started off and he was just a bad guy, talk trash to people. Where it started to change somewhat for him was, King of the Ring came up and Triple H was supposed to win the King of the Ring. But going back to the last episode when they wanted to punish Triple H, what they did was he didn't win King of the Ring. Instead, Stone Cold Steve Austin won King of the Ring. And in his first match, he battled Mark Merrow. Merrow accidentally split Austin's lip with a kick. Austin went and got stitches, came back. He had a match against Jake the Snake, who was doing the Bible-thumping type character at the moment. His snake was called, Revelations instead of Damien or Lucifer. And when Austin won, he went up to cut a promo, and instead, and Jake the Snake was walking by, and so Austin, he knew of all the John 3, he thought of all the John 3:16 signs and stuff. And so that's when he brought up Austin 3:16 says, I just whooped your ass. And he said that he knew he was being told to take the promo home, which means finish it up. And he, off the top of his head, said, and that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so. Which that ended up becoming his catchphrase, and now the narrative, though, is immediately that was it. He took off. Austin 3:16 signs in the crowd, which I'm not saying they weren't that, but they act like that was it. From that moment on, he was a superstar. The truth was, he wasn't even booked at the next pay-per-view. And then SummerSlam, he was in the free-for-all, whatever it was called, against Yokozuna. He wasn't even booked on the actual show. He was booked on the pre-show. And the talk was that, all the performers felt like they had the better show, which I think Raw was the better show. It's just that the ratings didn't reflect that. And so they're trying to figure out, how are we going to get the ratings to... what can we do? And someone, they didn't say who brought it up, but they said McMahon said, let's bring in Mike Tyson. They had tried to do business with Mike Tyson in the past, but Mike Tyson had his own issues at that time. He was convicted of the rape case Actually, Stephanie McMahon is interviewing. She says, "Wait, that didn't happen yet, right?" So she's trying to act like she didn't know he was convicted of a rape case yet. I thought that was totally put on, but they said that, bringing in Tyson, Bischoff, they told Bischoff that, like, you wouldn't believe what Vince McMahon, what they're going to do over there. And Bischoff was like, yeah, we're killing them in the ratings. They can do whatever they want. And then someone told him, well, they're bringing in Tyson. And he was like, oh, okay. And that kind of changed him right there. He knew that could be trouble. And, I mean, if you're in the entertainment business, like Tyson on pay-per-view, especially he's out of jail now. Tyson on pay-per-view is a big deal. And that one woman that, again, I don't know her name, she came on and she said, the thing about Tyson is he didn't have to come in here and be Mr. Nice Guy. It's wrestling. He could come in and be the bad guy. He doesn't have to try to be great. And so then they show clips of WrestleMania 14, which I was at. It was in Boston. And they talk about how bad Shawn Michaels' back was. And even being there, you could tell, like, this dude's back was totally messed up. And he put over Austin. Austin and Michaels both say the match wasn't good. The match was good. It's just that I think Shawn probably is hard on himself because he probably couldn't perform to the best of his ability. But it was still a good match. The finish, it wasn't as detailed as WrestleMania finishes would become. It was good at its time. Michaels went for the super kick. Austin grabbed it, spun him, stunned him. It was good for what it was. I mean, like, again, it wasn't later on down the line when guys were hitting each other with 6 times their finisher and then hitting with the other guy's finish. So, whatever. It was still pretty good at the time. And there was rumor that Undertaker was in the back taping his fists up in case Shawn Michaels would not put Austin over, as around that time, that was the thing. Michaels would kind of just not drop the title to people and kind of just walk out. So now that, they have Mania, Shawn Michaels is gone. Okay, who's going to be the next top villain to go against Stone Cold? Time for Mr. McMahon to step in completely as the heel character and be the trying to, like, I don't know if emphasis, just the total opposition of Stone Cold, and everyone lived vicariously through that as they started showing highlights of the whole McMahon Austin feud. And I gotta tell you, watching it, I loved watching it, man. It was such a fun time to watch all the antics between Austin and McMahon, and how Austin would always one-up McMahon. McMahon would always think he had Austin. But, I mean, who wouldn't like to smack their boss around? And Austin gets to beat up his boss. And Austin's like, any other time I would have been a bad guy, but during this Attitude Era, I was a good guy. And, Tony Atlas was like, there were no good guys. There were no bad guys. No, the good guys were gone. Even in movies. Like, if you look at that time in the world, even in movies, everyone was bad guys. So, Vince was like, we don't always set trends. We follow them sometimes, and we followed that trend. And he also said that he played the Mr. McMahon character as how he viewed rich people when he was younger. He thought that that's how rich people acted, and so he just went ahead and played the character the way that he did. And Austin said, like, what McMahon would do was draw the emotions out in people. He would make people hate him, and that's what sells tickets. Emotion sells tickets. People are gonna buy tickets, and that was always the thing too. Back at, like, WrestleMania one time, the big thing was Hogan saying, everyone bought tickets to see me. And Roddy Piper would say, everyone bought tickets to see Hulk Hogan beat me. And the Horsemen, they would say that. Everyone's buying the tickets to watch people try to beat us up or to beat us up. And so again, was it that everyone wanted to see Austin or everyone wanted to see Mr. McMahon get his ass kicked by Stone Cold? There's a little bit of both, And they asked Mr. McMahon, this is one of the good parts, yeah. They asked McMahon, what does he share with the Mr. McMahon character? And he's like, absolutely nothing. We're nothing alike. And then they cut to every single wrestler. Oh, they're the same. They're one and the same. It's McMahon. It's Vince McMahon with the dial turned up a little bit. And then Pritchard comes on. He says, I don't know how he can say they're not the same. I've been on the end of some of those Vince McMahon tirades. And then he would go and put them into a segment or something on TV. And I remember hearing from the Honky Tonk Man many, many, many years ago, he said that during his run with the IC title and they wanted to take the IC title off of him, and he said that they had a meeting at Vince's house and stuff, and they said, Macho, you'll beat Honky Tonk Man, you'll hold up Liz, you guys will be celebrating around the ring, Honky, you'll roll out of the ring, and that's the last we'll see of him. And Honky was like, yeah, I'm not going for that. And then they called him up on the phone, and he said, Vince, if you want the title, it's yours. Come, it's sitting right here on the mantle of my house. And he said, I remember when he was talking with Austin, and he said, I heard him say that. If Austin, if you want the title, it's sitting right here on a mantle in my house. He said, yeah, he used a real life moment and put it into an interview. So I totally believe that. Eric Bischoff came on and said, Vince, now WWF was basically taking their formula of the more reality-based wrestling and stuff, and they were doing it better. And like he said, DX was basically NWO, and Mr. McMahon, he said, was basically Eric Bischoff. And he talked about how he did the evil boss before Vince McMahon, but McMahon did it better. And then Vince McMahon comes on and says, well, he might have done it first, but, he didn't do it as good as I did. And Bischoff also was saying, the thing was, now the NWO angle is 2 years old. It's not fresh anymore. And so all this new WWF Attitude stuff, it's all fresh. So the tide is turning. And do you smell what The Rock is cooking? So The Rock comes in, and they go in and they explain, he explains his family. We're in a time right now where the Samoans are just all over TV, and it can be kind of frustrating at times. But I love hearing the pride that they all have with their family. I think it's great. It's really inspiring to see how much pride they all have with their family's history of wrestling. And it's like they're all in wrestling. Pretty much, it's in their blood. It's pretty much like they're all pretty much good. There's a couple that aren't. I'm not going to name names. People know. But The Rock talks about, High Chief Peter Maivia and Rocky Johnson, and how High Chief Peter Maivia, I love the way he says Samoa too. Samoa. He doesn't just say Samoa, but he says he put Samoa on the map, and they show clips of him when he was like 11 years old, and he said he remembers the first time he met Vince McMahon. He'll never forget it. And finally, around 96-ish, they brought him in. He was going to be billed as the first third-generation star, and he was totally wholesome. He was the blue chipper, he is the blue chipper. They just, they put a rocket on him and shoved him down everyone's throat, to the point that when he would come out, people would resent him. And you have people saying Rocky sucks. And a decision was made to turn him heel. And he came out and joined the Nation. And what happened there was he asked Vince McMahon, hey, can I have, I don't know, he said like a couple minutes. Can I have a minute to just explain my heel turn? And they gave him that time. And The Rock has always been a person to say, when you're given that time, you make the most of it. And that's when he cut that fantastic heel promo. I have 3 words: die, Rocky, die. That's the gratitude I get from you pieces of crap. And he talks about, seeing all the signs out there. Rocky sucks. Well, Rocky Maivia is a lot of things. but sucks isn't one of them. It was such a good heel promo. And he says, like, within a month, he was, like, top heel in the company. And doesn't necessarily mean he was main eventing, but he definitely was, like, top heel of the company. And, Rock explains, like, sometimes when you're out there performing, there's like a click, and you feel it, and you know when that click happens. And not too long after that, the decision was made to put him over as the heavyweight champion. So now you have The Rock as the heavyweight champ, and it was said, like, he's the first black world champion, and then he would say, yeah, Vince, I told that to Vince, I'm the first black champion. And Vince said, yeah, well, I don't really see that. I mean, the only color I see is green. And, a lot can be said about that. I do think that color is seen, but I think that the biggest color seen is green. So, yeah, he does see green more than any other color, but you can't look back at history and not say that color hasn't affected careers and things like that. Even to the point now, I think we're in a time where, just to be relevant with the times, Triple H was asked last week about color, and was asked about not having black people, black athletes on the pay-per-views. And he's like, well, I don't see it that way. I don't really see color. I just see talent. And the thing about that is, the guy that asked the question is stupid, because he doesn't realize, like, more people see the television show than the pay-per-views. And at the time, more of the champions are black. And like, for me, it's going to sound maybe hypocritical. I don't see the color. Like, I don't. I'm a fan. I see who is good and who's not. And, it's a business, and they can't, especially nowadays, they can't run a business like that. So I just think that Triple H answered it kind of didn't answer it, maybe not worded the best, but I definitely, I don't know. Anyway, whatever. It's not to make this whole political thing, but anyway, they start showing some more attitude highlights, and mention how big it got, and CDs and toys. Rock hosting Saturday Night Live and hosting the National Public Convention, and now you have The Rock in a movie, and Triple H is in a movie, and Stone Cold's in a movie, and so all these people are in movies. And from Meltzer comes on and it's like, yeah, from an entertainment standpoint, the show was fantastic, but not so much from a moral standpoint. They were doing things that, a lot of people said, I wouldn't let my kids watch, and it's funny, because I'm actually at a moment with my son with AEW where I won't let him watch because of some of the things they've done. And, I never thought I'd be like that, but yeah, when you become a parent, things change, as we'll get to with this segment. So they talk about how the Attitude Era was family friendly. Vince says it's family friendly. We don't kill people, we don't shoot people, we don't stab people, we don't do murder. And they immediately show Pillman with the gun, Kai and Tai with the sword, and a buried alive match. And then they say, oh, maybe it's adult kid friendly. And they do show, like, kids, like they're selling towards kids, the toys and everything. I think this was the era that was geared towards college kids as well. I know a lot of college kids would watch Raw and Nitro in their dorms and in the big lobbies and stuff and all that. So, they said our kids would go to school and tell their teacher to suck it and stuff like that. Definitely, it was watched by a lot of people. Shawn Michaels comes on and says how he was one of the people in the forefront leading it this way, but things are different now. He has daughters, and he would go back and see stuff and go back and go, man, I wish I wasn't so objective towards women. And that's kind of what I was just going to get at is, they start showing how they treated the women during this time. And, how much they objectified women. And then they show Sable, and Trish comes on and says Sable was the pioneer to the divas, which it's not true. Sunny was. I mean, Sunny was the I'm not counting like Miss Elizabeth back in the day and Sensational Sherry, but when they get to this new era, Sunny was the first one. She was the one on America Online when you would download her picture and stuff, not nudes or anything, just regular pictures. She was the big star, and then Sable came in and kind of took over on her. But I think part of the reason why they didn't bring up Sunny now is because she's in jail for DUI. Well, actually, she killed a guy from drunk driving and stuff. But Sable also plays into the future as well, as you'll hear probably the next episode. But Sable was super over. I mean, I would say there was a point in time where Austin was the number one star and Sable was number two. Much like nowadays, I think that like Cody Rhodes is number one and Roman Reigns is up there. And I think maybe the next one might be Rhea Ripley. CM Punk too, but I think Rhea Ripley is top 3 or 4 stars in the company. It happens, it does happen when a woman can be that top star. And Vince explains that why they were going so much with the women like that was a lot of the times they were the ones that drew the highest ratings on the show, even more so than the men. And Triple H comes on and says, hey, what was worse, the guy who made up all this stuff or us that did it? Who was the worst? And they start talking about how they really started going above and beyond, and it's that term, pushing that envelope. We're pushing the envelope. And now they delve into Owen Hart. And it's crazy because Owen Hart gets about 4 minutes. So, they give a really quick Owen Hart. When Brett left during the screw job, Owen Hart chose to stay. And Brett says, Owen always thought I was mad at him for it, which I wasn't. But they started to make fun of him and poke fun at his character. Originally they gave him a match against Shawn for the heavyweight title, then they pushed him right back down to mid-card. Owen then, after he joined the Nation, which never really made sense, but they started having him do the Blue Blazer character again. And Brett is like, well, everything they did to him was just to get back at me. And Vince comes on and says, if that's the way Brett feels, then all that does is speak to his ego. And then they show, they mention the date, and Pritchard, you can visibly see how emotional he is. He's like, oh yeah, that's Owen. Now he's done an episode on his podcast about Owen, and you can just feel the sadness, and they talk about, well, they show the pre-taped interview that was playing, that the crowd was watching, and the arena was, so when this happens, a lot of those interviews are pre-taped, and the crowd it's completely dark, and the only thing on are the big screens in the arena. And that's when Owen Hart fell from the ceiling. And it was said when he fell, he yelled at the ref, look out, and the ref kind of moved out of the way, and he bounced off the turnbuckle. So the crowd didn't actually see it per se. Like, maybe some people did see it, but it wasn't, the lights weren't on. The lights came on, and the medical team was down there working on stuff. People didn't know what was going on. Remember, this was a time where a lot of people thought maybe this is part of the show. So I guess, and I've never watched this pay-per-view, so I guess they came back on, and Jim Ross was explaining to people. They weren't showing in the ring. They were just showing, like, crowd shots, and they were explaining that, an accident has happened. Owen Hart fell from the ceiling. You can see, when you watch the clips here, you can just look at Jerry Lawler and see how panicked he is and how worried he is. And they then, they wheel Owen Hart out. They wheel him past the wrestlers and everything. And then maybe one of the dumbest. I think Vince McMahon saying that if it was rape, it was the statute of limitations is passed up. I think that's one of the dumbest things. But this one is right there with it. Jeff Jarrett and Deborah, Jeff Jarrett's like one of Owen's best friends, his tag team partner. He's on. He's he sits there and he's like, Owen, I'm praying for you. And Deborah's crying. She's like, me too. And then, without skipping a beat, he goes, now, Val Venus, you've been trying to get your hands on these puppies. And it's insane that they had to go on with the show like that. And then they announced that Owen passed away to the pay-per-view watching crowd, but they didn't announce it to the live crowd. And the reason they didn't was because they didn't want to create a panic. And Vince says, like, you know, it's the question of all the ages for him, I guess. Do you continue the show or do you not? And he said, look, these people came to see a show. They didn't come to see someone die. I understand how that can be viewed as callous. I don't think he meant it in that way. I think what he meant was, hey, look, they didn't come here expecting to see someone die tonight. They came here expecting to see a show. I think he worded it wrong, because there's a few things also where he talks about scraping Owen up off the mat, scrape him up off the mat and continue the show. Because that's been put out there. That was taken out of context. He was talking about, Brett says that we would just scrape him up and continue on with the show. But Vince said that he didn't want to create a panic and that he's going to continue with the show. He's a businessman. The show must go on. He said if it was me, you know, and then they asked Brett, you know, I'm sure if it was Shane or Vince, they'd stop the show. And Vince says, look, I don't fault Brett for anything he says. He has the right to say anything he wants. He's a big brother. He's acting like a big brother. But if it was me, I would get me out of the ring and continue on with the show. The problem I have with this, number one is once Owen fell, this was a crime scene. They didn't know. There were rumors like, oh, maybe he got pushed. Or, you know, they didn't know. And, you know, in the end, it was an accident, but they didn't know. This was a crime scene. So it shouldn't have even been in Vince McMahon's hands. And him saying like, hey, look, had it been me or my son, I would have continued with the show. I'm a businessman. That's the problem. You're thinking of like a business. This wasn't your son. So yes, they should have stopped this. It's not even I don't even understand, you know, and then making the wrestlers perform after that. And then here's another thing where I will defend them. Well, it's not so much defending them, but they would show clips and there's all this blood in the ring. And they try to act like it's Owen Hart's blood. It wasn't. They had done a segment before the pay-per-view with the Brood, who would give people blood baths and stuff. And so that's what that was. They try to make it look worse. I mean, this is already one of the worst moments ever in the business, and they try to make it look worse. And I think that's where they come off looking bad to me. You know, for lack of a better term, the blood's already on their hands. You don't need to add to it, you know. So, yeah, that's the. It's sad that Owen Hart thing. It's such a big thing, but you only get really, like I said, it's only like they're dipping their toes in the water. So they settle the lawsuit with Owen Hart's wife, and then Vince says, well, we found out, you know, that it wasn't our fault, which we knew. It was the manufacturer's fault. You know, and it's said that they went and used a cheaper rigging company, and there was a lot of things wrong with that night. It was, you know, but Brett said that once the police called him and let him know, like, yeah, it was 100% an accident, that he forgave Vince. But I think that he really didn't, and I also think that he kind of had to say that to save face, because he ends up going back to work for WWF later on in his career. So a lot of damage control, I think, being done there. And then they show a reel of more of some of the way over the top moments, you know, Kane getting set on fire, and you know, all these crazy over the top moments, or as they like to say, pushing the envelope. And the teaser for the next episode is just we were giving the fans what they want, and who knows what I don't know if we can push the envelope any further, but who knows if what the future holds. And that's kind of where they end off the episode. So yeah, this was more, you know, Attitude Era, and it touches on a sad note with Owen Hart. It kind of again, man, I don't know. I mean, you can't. How much time can you give it? Because it's not an Owen Hart documentary thing, but it's such a big moment, and it gets kind of just gets glossed over like it was nothing. So, yeah. So I kind of figured for the sign off on this one, I could probably do this one the next episode, but I'm gonna do it now because I can't think of anything off the top. Talking about the Owen Hart thing kind of bummed me out, but during the next episode is when they're gonna start with the other endeavors, like the XFL. When Vince McMahon would have a commercial, and he comes out and he's like, "I want my football," and then there's just a clip where he's at the first XFL game, and I'll talk more about the XFL next episode, but he comes out, and much like the Aretha Franklin thing, he's like, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the XFL."